Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing as the Toronto Argonauts lose a game they should have won 23-27 to the Calgary Stampeders in Calgary. Before we get to all the reactions and all the breakdowns and everything that you need to hear, I want to tell you about Something in the Water Brewing because there's a chance for you this Friday night to come out and enjoy some of the greatest beer that you can find at Something in the Water Brewing and then make your way down to BMO Field for the game, the rematch against these very same Calgary Stampeders. Something in the Water Brewing is in Liberty Village. It steps from BMO, it steps from McMahon Stadium, the Argos practice facility. And so if you get a chance to, you got to come out and try some of their beer, including Longboat Pale Ale, the beer that is made for fans of the Double Blue. Friday, make sure you mark it into your calendar, hit Something in the Water Brewing, and then come on out to the game at BMO Field. He's JB. I'm Ben Grant. We're going to do our best to sort out this puzzle that was really a different game in the first half than it was in the second. The Argos just absolutely dominating play in the first half, but then only scoring a single point in the second half and allowing Calgary to score 21 points in the fourth quarter. JB, how did this game turn on a dime like that in the second half?
Well, that's a really good question. I think clearly switching to a tight man coverage, pushing up on the receivers and then not, taking away that first look from Dukes had a huge impact. I think defensively, they were able to control the field because Dukes just could not get a look and was getting sacked for big losses. So I think that had a major factor to it. And then, offensively, to be honest, I think they were really, they were really lucky. I think that, I thought the running back pass interference was nonsense. I thought the McFadden almost pick was a really bad break. I didn't think defensively, I didn't feel like Calgary came out and did anything particularly effective. I just thought they had better field position and, were able to kind of make a couple of big plays.
Let's go back to the first half and we'll kind of walk through this game a little bit. I loved the Cameron Dukes that we saw in the first half. This looked like the Cameron Dukes of the first two games of the season. I thought he was playing really good football. He had that gorgeous pass down the sideline to DeMonte Coxey, and in credit to Coxey, he made an amazing catch. It was one of those that seemed to sail over from his right shoulder to his left, and he sort of Willie Mays basket caught the football, as my broadcast partner Mike Hogan said on our TSN 1050 play-by-play. That's what it looked like. It was just dropped right in there, and that's not really a throw that we've seen Dukes make. And he was also using his feet really well. He was scrambling. He had ended up with 95 yards rushing. A lot of that coming in that first half. And then it seemed to just die out. They had a couple of nice touchdowns. He had a touchdown pass. He had a touchdown pass to Richie Sandani. Again, a heads-up drive, a heads-up play. The defense was flying all over the field. Duke's using his legs well. Everything went Toronto's way. It felt like when it was 22-6 at the end of the first half, this felt like a game that really should have been in the bag. And yet 1 point of offense in the second half. And Calgary, like you said, got a few breaks. But let's look at that first half of football. Is there stuff that Toronto can take from that first half, from the successes they had, and apply it going forward? Like, can Cameron Dukes continue to be the starting quarterback for the next week with some of the highlights that we saw in the first half?
I think defensively for sure. I thought getting after the ball, turning the ball over, getting interceptions, which is something I think the defense should be capable of doing more because they are, really talented, and I think they should be getting more turnovers than they have. They really need to get a little more pressure on the quarterback. That has been a problem the last to be honest, like the last 3 games, like I know they're dealing with injuries, but they are just not, um, they're not getting there the way they need to. I mean, they didn't have any sacks tonight, and Dukes was sacked 6 times. That's a huge problem. Like, you're not going to win any football game with that kind of contrast. So, I think defensively there were some good things. I like that they were able to hold on to some picks, and the secondary was definitely playing much more physical, much more aggressive, which was great to see. I think they're getting more confident, especially Benjamin. But offensively, look, that was the Dukes. That was the confident Dukes we saw from earlier in the season. I just don't know why Calgary was playing him that way. But, that Dukes was running, that Dukes was making quick decisions. Dukes pushed the ball down the field. He looked confident. He looked dialed in. That's the Dukes who won the first game of the season. I just don't know why Calgary allowed that Dukes to exist, because the second half was the Dukes that made us both pick Calgary to win this game.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the book right now, and it is weird that Calgary didn't open with that, but I do want to give credit to Dukes though in that first half for taking, for really taking what was there and making some very accurate throws and just good decisions overall. But he's shown that he can do that if you're going to play off a little bit and you're going to give him some opportunities. You're going to wait in the pocket, let him wait in the pocket, or allow him escape lanes. And it was interesting in the second half. They seemed to play where they weren't really rushing him so much as they were just containing him, just keeping him in there and say, okay, you stay in this pocket. And sometimes just with a 3-man rush where it wasn't really so much a rush, even on that last drive, like Hauser had no intention of trying to get to the quarterback. He was just staying back, looking to tip the football and just sort of get in his window, get in his way. And, that really disrupted things. I thought it was interesting that post-game, Coach Dinwiddie said that he puts the loss on himself. He wasn't happy with his play calling in this game. He felt like he should have called more run plays. He questioned why they were throwing the ball so much.
Yeah.
And
well,
why
he's
they
not the only one who feels that way.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Kadeem Carey, 8 carries in the end, 31 yards. Not great production from him. But why do you think they got away from the running game? It's not like it was working really well in the first half. It was more Dukes that was responsible for the run game. But why weren't they going with Kadeem Carey more?
I don't know. I thought that was also a Hamilton issue. I think, I can only hypothesize. They were frustrated that they were unable to do anything passing, and sometimes when you get frustrated, you keep digging that hole instead of giving up on it. And I think I think like anybody, you get, you feel like you should be able to do something, and you want to keep trying it because you feel like you should be able to. And, they just felt like they were going to be able to move the ball, and they couldn't. I thought they definitely should have mixed more runs, because there were times, when they're rushing 3, if you're rushing 3, somebody's got to be running the ball.
It felt to me like the game plan coming in was to use Calgary's expectation that it was going to be a Kadeem Carey heavy game against them, and there was going to be a lot of play action to Carey and RPOs that could turn into passes and rollouts and stuff like that off of the looks to Kadeem Carey. And I think they almost got caught up in that. And sometimes when another team is expecting you to do something, it's because you do that thing really well. And I think the Argos maybe got in their own heads a little bit here and said, well, Calgary's going to be looking for Kadeem Carey to run, but maybe that's okay. Maybe you just say, yeah, because we do it really well. This offensive line is great at run blocking. Carey is one of the best backs in the league. Let's just run it, even if they are looking run. I think Toronto was good enough a run blocking team that might have worked out. Maybe this game ends differently if they stick with the run.
Yeah, look, I thought in that third quarter, like, all you need here are field goals. Like, with this lead, this is not the BC Lions. We keep ignoring last game, but like this is not a team that that you have to be that terrified of. I mean, as long as you're still getting a couple of field goals, this game's out of reach. And it was just really frustrating that look, they did a great job in kick return, so they weren't able to really get any field position that way, and they just were not able to manufacture field goal range plays. I mean, I think that's probably the most disappointing is when you're unable to kick field goals and you're really getting crushed. And if you're going to get crushed that way, something has to change. I just felt like they banged their head against that wall the whole second half. And, I agree with coach. Something had to be tried. And I don't know why they didn't, because that was a game they should have won. And to take a game in Calgary that you should have won, I mean, that's a bitter pill. And I know, like Calgary's in his head a little bit. He just does not have any success against this team.
Well, and it predates Coach Dinwiddie. If you go back to 2014, all the way back to the 2014 season, Toronto has won exactly one time in Calgary since 2014. It was Ryan Dinwiddie's first game as Toronto Argonauts head coach. They opened the season in Calgary and came away with a 23-20 win. And that's it, going back to 2014. So it has been a tough place for many different Toronto coaching staffs and teams to play for whatever reason. It's just a building they haven't had success in with that one game aside. And it looked like they were going to end that streak today, but yeah, for not. A stat that stands out to me, and I don't quite know what to do with it yet, is DeVaris Daniels held without a catch. Between he and Coxie last week, they only had one reception, and tonight Coxie got more involved, but DeVaris with 2 targets, no receptions. One of the targets was on a double move deep throw late in the game, which I really liked. I liked that play call. It just wasn't there. And then his only other target of the night was on that last drive where he ran a dig route and it was well covered and the ball was knocked away. But that's it. I know DeVaris has moved positions. He used to be the boundary side slot, and now they moved him over to the number 2 to the field side. What can they do to get DeVaris more involved? He's got to be a bigger part of this game plan. He's got to be a guy you lean on. When you got a young quarterback like Cam Dukes, you have to lean on your veterans. You have to lean on your best players, and DeVaris is one of the best players on the Toronto Argonauts, but they're not treating him like that right now. You don't only give your best player 2 targets, and both of those coming in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is that when teams play press, the offensive line is having. Look, I think people have discovered the offensive line has a problem with bull rushing, and teams are using that against them for sure, and that the offensive line will still, talented. Is not the pass pro strength that we hoped, and when teams are playing that kind of press, there's just no time for a route runner like DeVaris to be used. Look, he's a route runner. He's not he's not a jet guy. He's not a take the top off the defense guy. He's a professional route runner, and there just is no time for routes to be run when they're playing that tight man. They're getting to the quarterback. I think, I really do think it is an offensive line issue that's born out of the quarterback issue. I think that they are less scared of what he's going to do downfield, and they're playing more aggressive. I don't know. Like, I don't think there is a solution other than you have to be able to protect long enough to throw a ball to a route, and they just couldn't in the second half. Like, it wasn't like he was making bad throws. He was either running for his life or he was getting sacked for an 11-yard loss.
I'm
And
interested
those were
to.
basically the two plays they ran over and over again.
I'm
Like I don't
interested
know what the
to.
play for sack was, but
Yeah.
and then there was that weird play where the guard and the tackle thought there was a whistle, maybe.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that one too because I actually didn't think the line played too badly. I thought they were okay, but you giving up sacks, like I felt like Cam Dukes held on to the ball a little bit too long. But there were two plays like that. So one where there was a real problem. You talked about the bull rush, and Gregor McKellar was up against Mike Rose, and Rose just completely backed McKellar into Dukes for the sack, and that came at a really unfortunate time. And then the other one, yeah, I don't know. It looked like both Isaiah Cage and Ryan Hunter thought there was a whistle because they stood up and acted like the play was dead. But it didn't seem to be at all. In fact, I think it was Julian Hauser on the play, just kind of came in completely untouched. He stood up initially too, like he thought there was a whistle, and then he's like, "Oh, there's no whistling." Just ran in and sacked Dukes untouched. And there was another play. I think it was Hicks that came in untouched as well. Like there were a few plays that weren't blocked properly, and I think two of them came on 3-man rushes, which you just can't have.
Yeah,
But
I don't. I mean, I don't know if more rollouts. They don't do a ton of rollouts. Like maybe like kind of a rollout split field thing with levels. Maybe more slants. More RPOs, kind of quick hitters where you're able to get rid of the ball where guys are off press. I didn't think I mean, it was really hard to evaluate because, I mean, I mentioned the two plays they had. Like, it just was that over and over again.
it looked to me like they did have a lot of RPOs. Again, I'm really interested to rewatch this game because I it's hard like doing the broadcast. There's a lot of stuff that I missed, and I'm interested to rewatch tomorrow and really take a look at some of those things. But like to me, it looked like they had called a lot of RPOs and a few that the Dukes pulled, and after pulling, realized like, oh, I should have probably handed it off. One of them turned into a run, and actually a very successful run. There's one where he realized after pulling it's like, oh, my glance red's not there. And then he tucked and followed the path that Kadeem Carey had set off on. And that worked out well. But I think more often than not, when he pulled the ball looking to pass, what he thought he was going to see wasn't there at all. And the problem with an RPO is if you don't throw it immediately, well, that's it. Like your play is over. And so you can't read those incorrectly. So I do want to go back and see some of that, but it looked like a few of those were problems for Cam Dukes. And I haven't seen him get a lot of RPO calls. We talked about that being one of Nick Arbuckle's strengths. I haven't noticed as many as I did, or at least as I thought I did in this game. So we'll have to take a look at that. In terms of,
Uh,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no. I mean, I think, he just, I mean, I'm of two minds. Like, yes, I felt like he earned a right to finish the game because he did play so great in that first half. But I also feel like after the third quarter, they just should have, I really feel like something else had to happen. I mean, they just kind of banged their head against the same wall for the entire second half.
It's so hard as a coach on the sideline to make that call because there was no real, to me, there wasn't a real obvious point. Like to me, the turning point in the whole game was that kind of phantom pass interference call on Fraser
Yeah,
Sopik that like that changed the whole game because at that point, Toronto's still up at that point, 23, I think it was 23-6 at that point when the pass interference call, and that's a massive play in the game.
that's an outrageous for I guess it brings up a couple things for me. Like I know we've talked in the past, like one of the things I really love about watching international rugby is when they go to replay the booth talks about their decision making. And I just defy central command to explain how that was pass interference. Is that the new standard for pass interference? That if you put your hand on somebody and then 2 steps later they trip, that's pass interference? I mean, that's preposterous. There's no chance that's the new standard.
Yeah,
Like, I just
I
don't
don't know.
understand. Like, they weren't even hand fighting. He fell. Like, it just was not pass interference. And it frustrates me because they make these cases individual in a vacuum without any sense of, oh, okay, so that's pass interference. So I look forward to there being 32 pass interferences next game.
And of course, there won't be because that
No, of
doesn't
course
usually
not.
get a flag. Like I was surprised when the flag was thrown. Watching it live, I'm like, well, that's not pass interference. And then when I saw the replay, I thought it was even less of a pass
No,
interference
that
penalty.
was absolutely the right challenge, and that was a disgraceful call. There's no chance that's pass interference, and I would give all the money to hear a referee explain to me how that was pass interference with a straight face.
So, and if you didn't see the play and you're listening to this podcast, then let me describe it to you. So, Peyton Logan, the running back, was running basically a streak up the middle of the field, and Fraser Sopik had inside position on him. So, Logan's a little bit to Mare's right, running up the hash mark basically. But because Fraser Sopik's got inside position, Logan is trying to get past him. He's trying to outrun him so he can cut back inside because the ball is thrown on the other side of Sopik. And Logan's turning on the Jets, trying to get by. It's the only way he can make the play. Sopik's just running in a straight line, and Logan didn't have the speed to get by him, and he fell to the ground. Now, Sopik there were two sort of swats. Logan swatted Sopik's hand away at one point, and then Sopik kind of swatted Logan's hand away. But it's as they're running. It
Right.
wasn't like he
And
stiff armed him to the ground.
like exactly. And the um you know the test of pass interference is not, is there physical contact between the receiver and the DB or the receiver and the linebacker. I mean, I just didn't understand how they could say that was pass interference. Like, he touched him and then he fell on his own, and then they're like, yeah, that's pass interference. And like, even like, I thought at the very least, I don't even know if they have the option of this, like at the very most, it's incidental pass interference if you felt like that hand touch made his feet get tangled up. But no, I mean, I'm frustrated by it because it just again is like the impossible way of knowing what decisions are being made and how they're being made and how we're supposed to take that moving forward, because there's no chance that that's how pass interference is going to be officially called by the CFL. I could send them 25 plays from this weekend that would qualify as pass interference based on that.
And I think it wouldn't have gone the other way. Like, suppose there were no flag on that and Calgary had challenged. I can't see the command center looking at that and saying, oh, you know what, we're going to overturn this. That was pass interference. So, like, to me, that tells you that there just wasn't enough on that play. Now, that was the turning point. Everything changed from there.
Yeah, I mean,
However,
that didn't cost them the game, but
no, that's the thing.
obviously
Like you can't score one
frustrating.
point in the second half. Like that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, yes, it was a really bad call that changed the game. But at the end of the day, if you scored one point in the second half, you deserve to lose the football game. And to Toronto, with that in mind, deserve to lose the football game. You've got to be able to score at least a field goal in the second half. And their single point came. No, it wasn't on the opening. I was thinking it was on the opening kickoff, but no, it wasn't on the opening kickoff of the second half, was it? Maybe it was. Did they open the?
Um,
No, they.
yeah, with the wind.
Yeah, they opened the second half with a single point on the first play and did not score a point after that. So it's just got to be different. You can't get shut out for two quarters like that and expect to win a football game. Even though Calgary got shut out for two different quarters, they had a 21-point fourth quarter, and they scored five times in that fourth quarter. Two field goals, two touchdowns, and a rouge in the fourth quarter.
No, I
And
mean,
oh,
yeah, I mean, this is by far the worst loss. I mean, they've had other losses, games where they played okay, games where they played not that great. The other team played really well. I mean, this was a game that they really, um, you know, it is really frustrating to watch because like you've got to find a way to be able to improve your field position. I don't think they were doing it, anything incredibly elaborate, but I don't know. I don't know how and again, God, I don't know how you look at this and then like you come back with Dukes on Saturday.
I don't, but
On
like
Friday?
if it's me, because especially because it's a short week, and what you have, you're in a different position than every other team in the league right now because you've been preparing two different quarterbacks for the last couple of weeks. I actually think there's so much promise there from Dukes in that first half, and I think there are things that you can tap into and stuff. But I think the advantage Toronto has, there's still a few things I want to talk about in this game, but since you asked the question, I think you go with Arbuckle this week because I think it gives you an advantage. It's Calgary hasn't, they prepped for Arbuckle for this week, but they didn't see him at all. And I think that you've got that edge there where he's been getting the practice. He was ready to go for today. He was, I'm sure, in the plans. I think they were planning on bringing him in if Dukes had struggled in that first half. And so now you get a bit of an edge where you don't have to announce it as Coach Dinwiddie. You can play your cards close all week and say we're waiting to make a decision, and then on Thursday announce that Arbuckle is going to be our guy. And I think that does give you a bit of an edge, and you can still be ready to bring Dukes in if things aren't going well. So to me, I think I might look at that option in terms of how the quarterback question gets answered because it's one more week. The Argos have a bye coming off after this, and then it's Saskatchewan in town. And in theory, Chad Kelly could be back for that game. We're still waiting for official confirmation of that. But there's one more week they got to get by. Why not throw the Arbuckle card out there? He hasn't had a start yet this year. Calgary's probably not thinking about that. I don't know. I think that's the way I would approach it if I were head coach Ryan Dinwiddie. JB, let's get back into a couple little things from this game. I thought there were some bright spots, and maybe it's easy to forget about those. If this ends up being a 23-22 win or something like that, the way it looked like it might be late in that game, we focus in on some of the positive plays. Like I thought Royce Metier played a really nice game. That fumble that he caused in the first quarter, having the wherewithal to punch that ball free as he's tackling Reggie Begelton to the ground. The interception was a really nice play set up by Mason Pierce, who did a great job showing blitz and then backing out of it. And so there you've got Mayer thinking that there's a blitz coming from his blind side, thinking that that means Metier has to have flats on this side of the field. But instead, Pierce backed out. Metier actually circled back, had deep half, and was able to come over and pick off that football intended on that post route. So I thought there were some really heads-up plays that the Argos defense made, but it's so easy to forget about those little successes. The fact that Robert Priester has been playing really well at Sam linebacker, a position he wasn't really suited to coming into this. The fact that without Wyndham McManus, I thought Jonathan Jones looked really good. He and Fraser Sopik both seemed to get banged up a little bit. We saw Brian Lamanna come in a little bit. We saw Jack Cassar in there a little bit. But there were some bright spots for the Toronto Argonauts in this game. It's so easy to forget about it when you're left with the sour taste of a loss in your mouth at the end of it.
Yeah, I thought the secondary really, once again showed their physicality. I think they've really cleaned up that underneath screenplay. So I think that's definitely a plus. I think that they're getting a little more ball hockey, which is fantastic. Obviously, not having McManus is a huge issue. So, we can't underestimate that their best defensive player was absent. So I agree with you. I think there are positives to take away. Look, I thought the running game still looked decent. We didn't go to it as much, but I didn't feel like it was shut down. So, I think they still are able to run. And, those touchdowns were, I would say they were bad breaks, but there was very good coverage on those touchdowns. Those weren't busts. Those were balls that just got there ahead of the defender. So I think if you're looking from a secondary point of view, that's looking, I think, really positive. They just have to get that defensive line back to being able to put pressure on quarterbacks.
They altered throws. Like the defensive line got enough pressure to alter a bunch of throws, and I think they did lead to they led to some missed passes and missed opportunities for Calgary. But yeah, it just changes the game so much when it's now 2nd and 16 and not getting a sack. Calgary was never put into that position. You love Jake Mayer to be in the 2nd and 16 position repeatedly, because that's the position Cam Dukes found himself in with the 6 sacks. It's so hard to dig yourself out of that. It's worse than a holding penalty because you lose the down as well. And so those near misses on sacks, I give credit to Calgary because they were playing a quick game, just trying to get the ball out of Mayor's hand fast. But yeah, they've got to be able to get home on at least a couple of those. That might have changed things. But like you're saying, the secondary played well. Benji Franklin maybe had his best game as an Argo. He was so close to a pick in the first half where it looked like he timed it perfectly. He was in tight man coverage, jumped up for the ball, had two hands on the ball, and it looked like he just saw Metier flash as he was coming over to make that play, and maybe took his eyes off the ball for a second, thinking, am I going to run into my teammate here? And that's what led to the drop. But he could have had a pick. But yeah, encouraging that there were no busts that I saw. It looked like coverage was pretty tight. So that is an encouraging sign. But again, we're looking for small victories in a lost battle.
I don't want to pile on Dukes, but the 4 interception game was a problem in Saskatchewan, but the solution to that is not giving up sacks, right? Like you can't I can't just kill the line for 6 sacks. Like, you as a quarterback cannot get sacked 6 times. You just can't. And I think it is a significant challenge where there's stuff I really like about Dukes, and I think that he picks nice times to run, and he's fantastic in the red zone. But he just can't get, that's where I agree with you with Arbuckle, because I think you just can't have a quarterback getting sacked that many times.
And those have to be throwaways. Like, I think, I'm not saying force the ball in there. Like, you have to just fire the ball in there regardless. Like, if you're not seeing it, that's okay. Sometimes that happens, and those can be incompletions. That's fine. And then you are in a manageable, like, 2nd and 10 instead of a 2nd and 16 or 17 where you're just not going to dig out of that most of the time. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up here, JB?
That was really disappointing, I'd have to say. Like, I think that might be the most disappointing Argos game in my recent memory. I think just because it wasn't surprising. We both thought Calgary would win. But then Toronto played so well in that first half, and Dukes, looked so confident, and really all they had to do was win the field position and kick a couple of field goals in the second half. And the fact that they were unable to get to that bar, was incredibly frustrating. I just think that's a game you have to win.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's the worst game they've played, because I think there was a really good half of football in there. But I think what you're saying is, like, most disappointing in terms of a game they really should have won and ended up losing. But I think they looked worse in Saskatchewan. I think the offense certainly looked worse last week against Winnipeg, even though that was a win. So, like, it's just such a missed opportunity. That's what this is. I think that's probably how Winnipeg felt leaving BMO Field last week on their flight home to Winnipeg. They probably felt a lot like Toronto feels flying back home.
Yeah, that's the football gods. I think I know you don't believe in them, but
okay, I don't.
But I think Toronto did not deserve to win the Winnipeg game, and now that has evened out a little bit.
They've made things right. I don't believe in the football gods, but here we are. Toronto scores 3 touchdowns. They don't get a single field goal. Calgary with their 2 touchdowns and 4 field goals. Both teams with a rouge. Man, this it was a missed opportunity. But the nice thing, and both Coach Dinwiddie and Cameron Dukes said this after the game, the nice thing about where they are in the schedule right now is they don't have to wait long. It is a very short week. You've got 4 days rest, and then these 2 teams are back at it again in Toronto, and so they don't have to wait long. They're going to be back on that practice field before you know it, game planning for this rematch against Calgary. And we know that Ryan Dinwiddie does very well on the back half of back-to-backs or head-to-head matchups like this, the home and homes. He's done very well since arriving in Toronto at that second matchup. It wasn't quite the same in the Montreal game because there was one game in between there, but very similar, where Toronto lost at home to Montreal pretty badly. and then they go into Montreal 2 weeks later and just, clean them. And so maybe that's what Argos fans can look forward to, is knowing that Ryan Dinwiddie and his staff do adjust well to play a team a second time. And really, I'm not sure, as much as Calgary won the football game today, I'm not sure Calgary is a very good football team. I feel like it's a team that Toronto really should beat, and I think probably will beat at home at BMO Field.
Yeah, I agree. I think Calgary looked particularly good. I mean, obviously, Mayer is a Jekyll and Hyde guy, and we got both sides in the first and second half. But they didn't really do much to scare me. I think they just covered the kick return incredibly well and punt return, and took advantage of a couple of really nice throws.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. They just didn't miss in the second half. And yeah, I think maybe even the most underrated part of what you just said, the coverage on Janarian Grant, a guy who's been able to just completely flip the field and punt return, kick return. When he's not bringing it all the way back for 6, he's at least putting out those big return numbers that allow the offense to start deep in the other team's zone or at midfield. And there wasn't any of that today. They completely bottled up Janarian Grant, because Haggerty was having the game of his life. Haggerty, I think, ended up averaging over 60 yards a punt. He was just kicking the skin right off the football. But because they weren't getting any help in the return game, that field position never really flipped the way it normally would when your punter is having the game of his life like that. So it is what it is. But like I said, it's one of those short memory things, and they'll get back to it and see if they can win the second half of this back-to-back at BMO Field on Friday night. Well, that will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Again, from McMahon Stadium, it's the Argos 23, the Calgary Stampeders 27, as the Argos drop back to 500 with a record of 4-4. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe, foe, foe. Pull together.